Argumentation Ethics and the Problem of Children, a Structural Contradiction. Argumentation ethics, most prominently associated with Hans Hermann Hoppe, attempts to establish self-ownership as a necessary and universally binding norm through a transcendental argument. The central claim is that the act of engaging in argument presupposes certain normative conditions, most importantly, that each participant has exclusive control over their own body. From this, argumentation ethics concludes that self-ownership is not merely a contingent social convention, but a logically necessary precondition of discourse itself. Any attempt to deny self-ownership while participating in argument is therefore said to result in a performative contradiction. This paper argues that the existence and status of children constitute a fundamental challenge to this framework. Specifically, children demonstrate that the capacity for argument does not require full normative self-ownership, thereby undermining the core inference of argumentation ethics. The issue is not peripheral but structural. It reveals that the argument conflates minimal functional control with comprehensive moral ownership, and in doing so, overextends what can be derived from the conditions of discourse. Argumentation ethics begins from an uncontroversial observation. Argument is a conflict-free activity that presupposes the ability of participants to control their bodies, produce speech, and engage in rational exchange. From this, it is inferred that participants must implicitly recognize each other as self-owners, since argument would be impossible if one party denied the other's control over their own body. This move shifts from a descriptive condition, control over one's body, to a normative conclusion, ownership of one's body. The argument's strength depends entirely on whether this transition is justified. The case of children places immediate pressure on this transition.
Children are capable of argument.
They can engage in reasoning, express disagreement, and participate in discourse in a manner that satisfies the functional requirements of argumentation. Yet, they are not treated as full self-owners. Across legal systems, and even within libertarian theory itself, children are subject to guardianship. Their movement, labor, and decision-making authority are constrained by parents or guardians who are permitted to override their choices. If self-ownership entails exclusive authority over one's body, then children do not possess it in the full sense required by argumentation ethics. This creates a direct contradiction. If argumentation necessarily presupposes self-ownership, and children can engage in argument, then children must be self-owners. But if children are self-owners, then the widespread and broadly accepted institution of guardianship becomes unjustifiable, as it involves systematic interference with the child's supposed exclusive authority. Conversely, if guardianship is legitimate, then children are not self-owners, and argumentation cannot require self-ownership as a necessary condition. Either horn of the dilemma undermines the universality of the original claim. Proponents of argumentation ethics may attempt to resolve this tension by introducing the idea of partial or developing self-ownership. On this view, children possess self-ownership in an incomplete or emerging form, which gradually becomes full self-ownership as they mature. However, this response conflicts with the structure of a transcendental argument. Argumentation ethics does not claim that self-ownership is a probabilistic or developmental feature. It claims that self-ownership is a necessary presupposition of argument as such. A necessary presupposition cannot admit of degrees without ceasing to be necessary. If argument can occur under conditions of partial self-ownership, then full self-ownership is not required for argument, and the original inference collapses. Another possible response is to deny that children are full participants in argumentation. This position is empirically implausible, as children demonstrably engage in reasoning and discourse. More importantly, it introduces an arbitrary threshold problem. If argumentation ethics depends on a certain level of rational competence, then it must specify where that threshold lies. Any such specification will be inherently vague and subject to borderline cases. There is no clear, non-arbitrary point at which a human being transitions from non-argumentative to argumentative status. The existence of this continuum undermines the claim that argumentation ethics yields a universal and categorical principle. A further response appeals to guardianship as a form of representation, suggesting that guardians act on behalf of children rather than in violation of their self-ownership. However, representation does not resolve the underlying issue. If a guardian can legitimately override a child's decisions, then the child does not possess ultimate authority over their own body. This is incompatible with the notion of self-ownership as exclusive control. Introducing representation reintroduces external authority into a framework that purports to eliminate it, thereby weakening the internal consistency of the theory. The deeper problem revealed by the child case is conceptual. Argumentation ethics relies on an equivocation between two distinct notions, functional control and normative ownership. Functional control refers to the practical ability to use one's body to communicate, reason, and act. Normative ownership, by contrast, is a moral claim about exclusive rights, including the right to exclude others and to determine permissible uses. Argumentation requires functional control. Without it, communication is impossible, but does not require normative ownership. The fact that an individual can speak and reason does not entail that they possess absolute moral authority over their body. Children exemplify this distinction. They possess sufficient functional control to engage in argument, yet they lack full normative ownership. Their existence demonstrates that argumentation can occur in the absence of the very property that argumentation ethics claims is a necessary precondition. This shows that the inference from control to ownership is not logically valid, but rather an additional normative assumption smuggled into the argument. Once this distinction is made explicit, the core of argumentation ethics is revealed to rest on a category error. It attempts to derive a comprehensive system of property rights from the minimal conditions required for discourse. However, the conditions for discourse are significantly weaker than the conditions for full self-ownership. The ability to argue establishes that an individual has agency in a functional sense, but does not establish that this agency is morally exclusive or inviolable. The implications are substantial. If argumentation ethics cannot establish self-ownership as a necessary presupposition of discourse, then it fails in its central project of grounding libertarian property rights in a transcendental argument. This does not, by itself, refute self-ownership as a moral principle, but it does show that it cannot be justified in the manner that argumentation ethics proposes. The theory overreaches by attempting to extract a strong normative conclusion from a weak, descriptive premise. In conclusion, the problem of children exposes a structural flaw in argumentation ethics. The capacity to engage in argument presupposes control over one's body, but not ownership of it. By conflating these two concepts, argumentation ethics attempts to derive a universal principle of self-ownership from the mere possibility of discourse. Children who can argue without possessing full self-ownership demonstrate that this derivation fails. The result is not a minor inconsistency, but a fundamental breakdown in the logic of the argument itself.